Which is worse, a uber do-gooder or a narcissist? We'll have it on the show today and discuss which you would like to be if you had to choose. There was the greatest generation. Now there's the fragile generation. How did we come to raise children that can't even handle the basics? And why do small businesses run out of money and what to do about it? We'll have a discussion with a business strategist on that. Hello there, Terry here on Think America, where we reason first and then converse. I'm Terry Gilbert. This is America's Radio Town Hall. I invite everyday Americans to the program to let their hair down with me on thought-provoking conversation starters. This week, Carl joins us from the Southeast. He is out in Florida. He is a financial analyst, former CEO, and he writes code for computers. Hello, Carl. Nice to have you.
Thank you for having me on.
All right. And Nancy is with us. Nancy is a grandmother. She says she's still working. She's got an active CPA business. She joins us from the Southwest. Hello, Nancy.
Hello, Terry. Nice to be here.
All right, let's get going, both of you. Here's the first topic. In the hyper-political world that we live in, Americans say it'd be nice to have less political maneuvering all the time. I say, can we just leave politics out of it? It's something that I really noticed at Thanksgiving. Everybody now is buttoned up. They don't know what to say, so they just talk about, oh, and how are you? And how are you? It really is now dumbed down because we don't know what we can and can't say. And this has been going on for a while. How can we demand of our leaders, Nancy? I'll start with you first. When we are already gearing up for the 2020 presidential election and when the House leaders are Democrat dominant now, which is a change from the last 2 years, to finally leave politics on the back burner and have less political maneuvering? How do we demand it of leaders?
I do not know, because the only leaders I feel contact with are the local people that listen to us and pay attention. Washington is such a cesspool. And that's all they talk about. That's all they can think about is the next election. And they're analyzing who's going to run for the next election and who has a chance in 2020.
Maybe the question, Nancy, shouldn't only include leaders, but how do we get the media to talk about something else, Nancy?
That's a good point. It's like the media hasn't gotten over the election 2 years ago. I don't listen to the shows that just harp on let's impeach Trump. Let's impeach Trump. Let's talk about getting something done.
You sound exhausted.
Oh, I'm tired of it.
Carl, are you tired of it or do you thrive on it?
I've just turned it off. A number of years ago, I got rid of the cable at my house. I have no television here. All I use it for is movies. I have withdrawn from all of the social media and 90% of the online so-called news sites. The problem you have now is that the media, driven by the technology world that we live in, and the little pocket computer that tracks everything you do that you carry around with you all day long, is there for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to make money. And what makes money? Well, if the people are all ginned up about Trump or Hillary or the wall or whatever, then that's what they're going to write about and sell. There's the old adage that if it bleeds, it leads. Well, now it's turned into whatever we can get you to click on. There's a term for it, clickbait. But even outside the crazy far fringe sites on either side of the aisle, all of the mainstream media, all of them, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, you name it, AP, Reuters, they're all doing the same thing.
Carl, I would be less annoyed, because I'm with both of you on this, if there was more accomplished. I don't mind the political thread if there's more accomplishment of tasks at hand. Like you mentioned in another show that we did some time ago, I believe, that we have Obamacare that never got rectified. We've got a wall that hasn't been built. We've got a task that have to do with our overseas positioning in Afghanistan. We've got items on the agenda that never get really, they're half-baked or they never get really addressed. So I wouldn't mind that if we could get things done. But now it's the push for impeachment because of the sentencing recommendation about Michael Cohen. Senate Republicans want to see the business of Clinton and Lynch and Comey and Orr and Strzok and Page and Rosenstein and the FISA gang. They want all that out, not to mention the Clinton Foundation stuff. And while all of that is important, it seems that it should be not so dominant all the time. What needs to be dominant is how government is working for the people in accomplishing tasks, Carl.
Yeah, but if you fix something, then you can't use it in the next election. See, the whole point of Obamacare was, first off, the entire hospital and medical system in this country was on the verge of detonation because of the crash. You can take a look at the spending. You can take a look at what was happening with Medicare and Medicaid, and it was obvious. You just look at the facts. Those are the numbers. So what did they do? They bailed it out by essentially forcing everybody into the game. You must pay or you will get fined. And if they could have said you'll go to jail, they would have done that too. And then you had the Supreme Court that rewrote the law illegally, but did it anyway. And the Republicans said, oh, no, we're going to stop this. They took how many votes when Obama was president? As soon as Trump comes in, we can't get the votes to actually pass it.
Exactly.
So, it's exact same bill, okay, but all of a sudden it fails in the Senate where it passed handily because they knew Obama would veto it. And so, this is the game. And you have the media that instead of actually doing investigative reporting, like when we had Bernstein and, these little plumbers rooting around the Watergate Hotel.
Exactly.
Instead of doing that, now everyone's attention span is 15 seconds on their phone. So we're going to write clickbait stories. We're going to sell ads. Google and Apple are going to monetize them. And by Lord, we're going to make a ton of money, but nobody gets any smarter.
Back to you, Nancy. I agree, Carl. Back to you, Nancy. It appears as if this is here to stay. And I'm not sure what we can do about it other than I can stomach it if tasks are accomplished, even little bites out of the apple to get, to move the task forward, as we say, move the needle forward. Americans seem, and the media seems, because they shove it down our throats all the time, to like this political back and forth. The three of us might not, but maybe America really likes it because they're not as up in arms as maybe we are on this particular episode of the show.
I agree with you, Terry. It does feel like business as usual. But what can one little individual do to change it? I mean, you listen to these politicians talk about an issue, and they can play their speech from 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and they had a totally different spin on the whole issue. What they have to say and what they think and what they're doing is all for their political game. And it's just really tiring.
We need politics, for sure. We need news, for sure. I always look at the world of news as if politics is one major thread, or shall I say, it is the artery, but it's not the only artery and vein in the body of news. So if we can get other kinds of ways of looking at an issue that needs to be solved outside of the political vein and get our media personalities to talk about the issue independent of left or right or even independent of the independents out there, then that I think would help. We need the news. We need the whole truth about news, not just partial truths, which is sort of synonymous with fake news or the spin. We just need the full facts that help us get to the issue. I'm with you, Carl, though, when it's clickbait and tiny little vignettes that make somebody else money, make Google money, for example. I'm not sure how we get the media to look at an issue and the whole truth of the issue without the political spin or without the tiny little soundbite, because that's the clickbait that the American public has on their phones, on their desktops, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and you have to remember, this problem's not new. Okay. Walter Cronkite famously said that we lost the Tet Offensive in Vietnam. That's what he reported. It was a lie. The North Vietnamese didn't take a single foot of territory. They were slaughtered like dogs. And yet we lost. And that was, with all of the carnage that was shown on TV, was the turning point in American political opinion on the Vietnam War. And it was all
perception is reality. And when people looked at Walter Cronkite and said he's the most trusted man in America and he could deliver it poker faced and sort of a flat toned, people said, oh my goodness, he's right.
Yeah. But see, this is not a new problem. It's just now we've cranked up the volume because we all are carrying around these little computers with us all the time. And we don't just get our news for half an hour on CBS at 6 o'clock. Mm-hmm. It's now in your face constantly, and it's all being monetized. Then it was very simple. There was, General Mills had their ad for their cereal that ran along the 60 Minutes broadcast.
So how does the nation get out of being political, Carl?
I don't know that you necessarily get out of it. I think what we need to do is, as people, as individuals, we need to hold politicians accountable to what they claim they're going to do. And when they don't, they must go. And in addition, we have to start looking at the fact that as individuals, we collectively, not one crazy, but we collectively actually hold all the cards, because government only exists as long as there is an economic set of activity to support it with taxes. If there was a general strike tomorrow that said, you do this or else, and 10% of the people didn't go to work, whatever that or else was and whatever that issue was, it'd be over in a day.
Nancy, we're down to about a one minute, maybe 90, about 1 minute. Your thought, wrapping this up. How do we get out of being political?
I like what Carl said about putting an economic spin on it. You tell the politicians that you fix this or else. They need to get voted out. Although the elections don't happen every day. But
well, that's ideal, right? But now here we go again. The House is now controlled by the Dems. Nancy is back with the gavel. Pelosi, that is. And here we go again. I'm not sure that we can get out of this, at least not in the short term. I'm just not sure of it. I would like to have the media help us with this problem. But as we've already discussed, they like to throw sound bites at us and keep us fully charged on politics. All right, let's leave it there, guys. It's a big problem. It's too hyper political, and some would say it's too hyper patriotic as well. That's a conversation for another topic, another time. Maybe I'll do that on the program coming up at some point. Straight ahead, which is worse, the Uber do-gooder or a narcissist? We'll get into that straight ahead on Think America. Find me, Terry Talk Radio, on Facebook, thinkamericaradio.com for our podcast. We're back on Think America with Carl in the Southeast and Nancy in the Southwest. I'm Terry Gilbert. Which is worse, people? An Uber do-gooder or a narcissist? If you're trying to destroy the self-esteem of healthy individuals who want to be worthy of honor and respect, the less obvious answer would be the do-gooder. There's a book out, Men Without Work. The political economist and American Enterprise Institute scholar Nicholas Eberstadt presents a very strong case that government's social network of welfare and food stamps to help Americans left behind actually does nothing more than to rob them of their dignity, especially the opportunity to work and to do work. Nancy, you first. What is your take?
Oh, I agree that your standard of living should totally be tied to your production. And if you're going to live on social welfare programs and get by on food stamps, et cetera, that's all you're going to do is exist. People need to have, if they're going to work, they need to have an ability to make things better.
Is the government a do-gooder?
it's a safety, it's a safety net for people who have issues like drug and other issues, but too much so, because once you get on the welfare system, it becomes a crutch, and it's really hard for people to get off and start taking care of themselves.
Aren't we America, though, that takes care of our people? We take care of all kinds of other people. Once someone is here, even getting through the border in this hyper political world of the border and border security and Trump's wall and all the rest, and plops a little anchor baby here. Aren't we going to take care of that baby, Carl? Aren't we going to take care of that mom? Isn't that what we want to be, the do-gooder?
Do we? I mean, look. I understand the sentiment, and I understand the reason for it. Nobody likes to be the evil Scrooge and say, oh, no, no, no. But the country has a finite amount of space and a finite amount of resource. The government doesn't have anything. What the government gets, it takes from people who produce. When you go to work and you pay taxes, that's where the money comes from. That's where it all comes from. And so the real question is, would you personally go out and buy that mother and baby who came here illegally a pack of diapers and a bunch of baby formula? And if the answer is no, then why does she have the right to take it from you by force? And this gets back to the real question. What is the purpose of government? Is there a safety net that needs to be there under certain circumstances? Probably. On the other hand, we're all immigrants, unless you happen to be Native American. But my forefathers came here during a time when there was no welfare. You came through Ellis Island and you were dirt poor. You were lucky if you had anything. And if you didn't work, you literally starved.
And so the opportunity for the better life is the motivating factor, not the opportunity, Nancy, to have somebody take care of you for a better life.
Yeah, the ability to work should be a motivator. It's why we have more than nothing, or we have more than the minimum, is because we work hard and we produce a worthwhile product that people want to pay for.
If a woman comes to you and says, I just had a baby, I'm from a foreign land, would you buy her a pack of diapers and some baby food for that young infant?
I wouldn't take her into my home to support her. I wouldn't object to, the baby's going to starve if it doesn't get fed tomorrow, but long term, they need to come up with some solution.
Therein lies the issue, isn't it? Americans will help to a degree, but will we go the long haul? Will we go the long haul for everybody? Should we have a borderless society?
Well, you can't. I mean, look, we have 330 million people in this country. There's 7 billion approximately. And the median net worth, if you have $4,000 to your name, you are richer than half the people on this planet. Think about that for a minute. You're going to take 3.5 billion people into this planet, and we would all have less than $4,000.
How do we get back, Nancy, to you can come for an opportunity to work without a social net? How do we get back to that? And do it legally? I guess that goes without saying, but I just said it. How do we get back to that?
I don't think it's not really that we can get back to it. You need to start with your children when they're young and instill in them the work ethic and the idea that if you want to have that nice new car, you get it because you can pay for it, because you work hard and you make enough money that you can buy the car you want. You can live in the house you want. But it needs to start when people are young and they get trained and educated to the fact that, yes, you are going to have to work someday. You are going to have to support yourself.
But that has changed when we've had a social network of welfare and food stamps. to help those on the fringe. And it's been abused. It's been used to the max and abused. Let's leave it there and wrap up that segment. Good discussion, Nancy and Carl. When we come back, speaking of opportunities, let's talk about small businesses and why so many run out of money, what to do about it. I'll be right back. We're back on Think America. I'm Terry Gilberg, switching gears now to talk with Fred Parrish. He is a business strategist and co-author of The E-Myth, Chief Financial Officer, Why Most Small Businesses Run Out of Money and What to Do About It. Hello, Fred. Nice to have you on Think America.
Thanks, Terry. I appreciate you having me on.
I was intrigued by the title of this, Why Most Small Businesses Run Out of Money and What to Do About It. Let's start there with this interview. In the United States, 80% of businesses fail within the first 5 years. 80% of the survivors fail in the next 5 years. So take it away from there.
In my experience here, and it's almost 40 years now, the biggest problem with small business owners is the fact that very, very few of them have any financial management background. Most of the time they know how to sell something or make something that someone else can sell. And they just loathe the idea of looking at the numbers. And so it leaves them at risk at any moment of making a fatal decision. And they may not know it for months or even a year or two down the road. And by the time they see the ugliness developing, a lot of times it's too late to do anything about it.
But so many of them start out with a good spirit. They've got the entrepreneurial idea. They want to take a crack at the American dream. They want to take part in being their own boss, that whole philosophy. What's wrong with that? Are they typically undercapitalized? And maybe they should have more capital so they can hire a CPA. They can hire at least an accountant. Maybe that's the problem.
Well, part of the issue, actually, there's a two-part answer there. The first part is that their focus is a little bit askew, and so what happens? Again, they are focusing on production and sales. Most business owners think they can solve all their problems with more sales, and what we are saying is that, and in my experience, unless you have the right kind of sales, you could actually be selling yourself out of business. And the other aspect of it is that there needs to be a forward view of where the company is going, not where we've been. Accounting data, although it has to be done correctly, and it is important because you have to send reports to the bank and you have to file your taxes, that is historical data. And it is like driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour looking out your back window. Eventually, you're going to run into something if you don't turn around and start looking at where you're going. And so the small business owners, the most large companies have CFOs and are able to have that forward-looking view. Small business owners don't have the resources to go out and hire a CFO because they're very expensive people. And so they lose the ability to manage the predictive nature of their decisions. And that is what we are trying to teach them with the book. Look forward. Understand where you're going. You see where you are, but things change every day in a small business. And so we need to be able to understand if I do certain things today or within the next few months, what is that going to give me 6 months, a year, or 2 years down the road? Not only in profitability, but more importantly, in cash flow.
What are the businesses you refer to for the most part that go under? Are you referring to the businesses that pop up on the internet, these little mom and pop kind of home businesses where you might sell things from your garage, or you might be in some kind of a bartering business? Describe, in today's world where so many businesses are done online, the ones that are going out of business more than others?
And that's a really good question, Therese. It really is not necessarily the type of business and not necessarily the size of business. The reason that companies are going out of business is primarily when you're out of cash, you're out of business. And so, a lot of companies, maybe it wasn't a great business model. It's not a good product. There really isn't a market. The owner is a terrible manager. Those things happen. But the other companies, and I've seen this way too many times in my 40 years, because they could not see something developing on the horizon. They had their head down, and as Michael Gerber says, they're doing it. They're just running their business every day. They're not seeing what is coming so that they can manage that. We can't predict the future, but we can manage to it if we put the right systems in place. And so I'll give you a good example of the idea that it doesn't matter how large you are. We had a client a few years ago that was a $150 million construction company. They were going to 250 million very quickly, and they just completely vaporized because they outran their resources. So you have to be paying attention. It doesn't matter who you are, what kind of business you're in. If you're not doing the things that are important, managing the different aspects of the business, certainly. But
what was it about the company that they didn't see something coming on the horizon?
Right. Well, with that company, they actually were growing so quickly, they ran out of resources, and they could not raise cash fast enough, either by bank debt or investment capital. They just outran their cash, and they couldn't continue operating. And that happens a lot. The most dangerous time in a company's life cycle is not when they're having problems. It's when they are in a hyper growth phase and they think things are fantastic. Everything's going the way they want it to. This is great stuff. And they're not watching their resources. And it can happen so quickly that you can't react.
Let me switch our conversation to the news on ice cream. Everybody loves ice cream, right? I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream. I used to love Ben & Jerry's. I still love the flavors of it. I think they're creative, but I don't buy it. They have decided to put politics into their product. Now, some people will say, what's wrong with that? We should be purposeful in everything that we do, not just to make a buck, but it should be driven by some ideology, move the needle and so forth. And Ben and Jerry are very much on the left. And so they're trying to nudge, wink, wink, poke against the right or for the left in making ice cream. I say to that, they're losing folks that would normally buy it because of their political ideology.
I absolutely agree 100% with that. I don't buy it either. And maybe they are okay with that, but they obviously need to understand that if you alienate 50% of the market, you've lost 50% of the market, and you better be happy with the other 50%.
Or at least they alienate some of the people of the right that know what they're doing, because it's kind of a subtle marketing that they're doing.
Right, it is. And, I think if you're paying attention to what's going on, it is subtle, but it is certainly there. And I think that is they're taking a calculated risk here in that the younger generation, the Gen Z especially, they are very socially focused, and they only want to do business with companies who are socially focused. And so
that's correct. Fred, we got to wrap it up there. I agree with you. And they take a risk losing customers when you get political or you get trendy, as it were. Fred, how can people find you on the web quickly?
Yes, it's go to theprofitbeacon.com. You can get all the information you need about our book, our software, our services, everything there. Theprofitbeacon.com. Fred Parrish, thank you for being on Think America. We appreciate you. Thank you, Terry. Appreciate you having me on. Discussion about this straight ahead. Stick around. We're back on Think America. Fred Parrish, good interview with him. Essentially, my takeaway, Carl, was that many small businesses don't have financial acumen. They don't want to look at the numbers, and they want to stay in the past. For example, if they just want to have a little home business because they live in a little small house with a white picket fence, and they go down the street and they have their little storefront shop and so on and so forth, they don't foresee things happening on the horizon that could take them down very quickly. Do you agree with all of that? You're a guy who's been in business.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, it wasn't the first crack that actually went and worked. It was the third. The other two were voluntarily shut down because it was inevitable what was going to happen if I didn't. So those people who say, well, you just go do it and it's easy. No, that's not how it works. You need to be prepared for the fact that, as was cited, the statistic's accurate, 80% fail within 5 years, and, better than half of those fail in the next 5. The biggest problem that people run into, in small business in particular, is that as soon as you take on debt leverage of any kind, I don't care what it is. And by the way, every banker will be your best friend when things are going well to try to get you to do it.
No joke.
As soon as I can't tell you how many times I got the phone calls from the guys that handled a checking account. Okay. As soon as you do that in a small business, you are not just putting the business at risk that the company will go under, but you're going to lose your house. You're going to lose everything you have personally, because unlike the large corporation, which can play the leverage game, and when everything goes bad, nothing bad happens to executives. They just kind of float off and find another job with someone else who will give them $10 million.
I know that.
You have to personally guarantee all of them. Mm-hmm. And they will insist, and they will not do the deal if you don't. They will badger and push you. And once you do that, you had better be right. And what I learned from running an internet company, we were in a hyper-competitive environment. I had 100 competitors in our local market, most of whom failed. I eventually sold the firm. Better than half of them were gone by the time I did. And the reality of it is this. Every 18 months, I had to bet the firm. I had to bet the company. Because the technology was moving so fast that the investments that I had to make, what I had to spend, if I made a wrong decision, wrong company to buy from, wrong vendor, wrong partnership, whatever, we were done. Yeah. And you know what? You can be right 5 times in a row, but eventually you're going to be wrong. I don't care how smart you are. Mm-hmm. And so this is just the reality of small business, is that you have to make sure, though, that there isn't any leverage out there. So when you make those mistakes, because you inevitably will, that you can have some way to scrape by and keep things going. You try to grow too fast, and the way to do it, everyone will tell you, whip out the credit card or go to the bank or what. Don't do it, folks. Don't do it. And
Nancy, your reaction, you see all of those numbers from small businesses that come to you for CPA help.
I see it all the time. Small businesses are horrible when it comes to their record keeping. They don't want to pay for a capable bookkeeper. If they don't keep up with technology changes, they're going to lose. They're going to fall behind. If they borrow money, they might have trouble struggling to pay it back. If you grow too fast, you have to pay your employees on Friday, but you don't collect your receivables for another 30 or 40 days. You cannot grow too fast. So I see this all the time.
Let's leave it there. I want to introduce our next topic, and then we'll get into it in the next segment. Guys, I've pulled this topic because this is a biggie. We are very familiar with the Greatest Generation. Tom Brokaw wrote a book about them. Most of us know something anyway about World War II, but now we have a fragile generation. There's two authors in Reason magazine that wrote a very intriguing article about this, and basically points the finger at all of us on how did we come to raise children that cannot even handle the basics. I can't even handle the basics. That, of course, caught my eye. The first question when we come back from the break is whether or not you agree with this premise. What do you mean they can't handle the basics? And what, in fact, are the basics? But the article argues that bad policy and paranoid parenting making kids too safe to succeed. This might, in fact, be true or not, depending upon what you have to say after the break. Maybe we need more difficult tasks to present to kids. Or put another way, maybe we need a few natural disasters and war and more famine and droughts throughout the world to make our young people have to face these things and toughen up. All right, that's a big tee up. We'll see what Carl and Nancy have to say about this after the break. Megan isn't with us today, but I'll have your Change Your Life Technology segment. Find me, Terry Talk Radio, on Facebook, thinkamericaradio.com for our podcast. Carl, I teed that up about the Greatest Generation versus the fragile generation. Your thoughts as to what's happening with kids today?
No, I think they're absolutely right, but I'm going to point the finger somewhere that nobody wants to go. We not only have allowed our public schools to go there, we've demanded it. And even if you're a parent, I raised a daughter pretty much by myself since she was a baby, so I've seen this on all sides. There is no effective way to push back against this. It's just simply because if you disagree, well, guess what? Then eventually you're going to end up with suspensions and expulsions, and that goes on records and, and all kinds of bad things. If you actually have to work, then homeschooling isn't much of an option, because how do you do that and actually work? If you have a nuclear family, you can opt out of this if you're willing to put the effort in, and people should be, even though a lot of them aren't. But if you're not, this is not really much of a choice. Look at just one small example. When I was in junior high and high school, we all had to take shop class. I learned how to use a wood lathe, a metal lathe, and how to weld. And I was never any good at any of those three things. But if you put something in front of me that one of those things has to be done, I can do it. And so could every other single person that came out of that school system 6 years later. Mm-hmm. Today, you hand the average kid a piece of wood and say, make a cylinder out of that. Here's a machine. They have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. They don't know how to change a tire, Nancy. Yeah, they don't have to change oil, Nancy, in a car. And yet they've got the keys to a car at 15 with their permit and their driver's license soon thereafter.
Oh, yeah. And they're used to just sending the car to the shop. The word helicopter mom comes to mind, and the fact that kids are being so overscheduled with their band practice and their tutoring, but they can't walk down to the corner and play at the park after school.
That's correct. Do we need more real problems like natural disasters and droughts and even war to toughen up this next generation so as to produce another greatest generation, Nancy?
Well, I'd hate to see wars and natural disasters, but we as a society have enough problems to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
But how do we toughen up kids? They're couch potatoes. They're overweight, on balance. Now, we're talking in general, folks. I don't need a lot of emails about this. In general, we all know that. They're tied to devices. They care about things that don't matter in school and not their schoolwork, on balance with public schools. How do we get them to toughen up and to learn big things and take on big challenges?
Well, if we don't figure out a way to do it pretty quickly as a society, it's not going to be that long before I'm 65, right? Then I'm officially so-called on the dole. Gee, who's going to be paying the taxes?
Let me ask you something. Did you learn how to ride a bike on your own, Carl?
Not completely. I mean, Dad was back there holding on to the back of the seat until I thought I had the idea. Of course,
Nancy, what about you? Did you learn how to ride a bike on your own?
I had a bike with training wheels on it, but we did it out in the street in front of the house.
I ask you this because I think it's a good example, Carl, of how kids start with training wheels, and a lot of them go down to the local park where if they fall, they're going to fall on some dirt and some grass because they're smart enough to figure out they don't want to fall on the cement. And other kids kind of helped them. Maybe mom and dad were there holding on to the back of the seat a little bit, but for the most part, they let go. And there you go. That goes for skiing. That kind of goes for figuring out football drills and all the rest. We've lost a lot of that, I think. All right, let's just leave it there. I want to get to Change Your Life technology. Coral reefs do support many, many species in all kinds of areas where they exist for marine life. But a new discovery by a scientist that was able to see how coral broke into pieces and then grow anew to the same size in just 3 short weeks was revolutionary for him, as opposed to the 3 years that it had taken to grow an original coral. And this is very, very good news with micro-fragmenting, because when coral grows back, it grows back 40 times faster than it does ordinarily once it is broken in two. This is good news for single species of coral found in the Florida Reef and coral found in Australia, in the reefs in Australia, and all through the other areas that have a coral in abundance. And this is very good news for scientists that estimate that another 1 to 8 million undiscovered species are there within the coral that isn't broken. So the coral that does get broken and grows anew will be helping those species of organisms living in and around its reefs. Good news. I'm Terry Gilbert. We want to thank Carl from the Florida area for being on the program. Thanks to Nancy from the Southwest area for being on the program. All of our listeners and those who call to write the show as well. You can find us at thinkamericaradio.com. Till next time, reason first and then converse. Do you share a bathroom? Well, if you don't, it could save your marriage, according to an award-winning British and Hollywood actor. We'll talk about it. Plus, what is political capital? And does President Trump have much of it? We'll discuss that as well. And GM got bailed out a decade ago by American taxpayers, but now they're laying off 15% of their workforce. 5 factories are already gone. What is up with that? Hello there, Terry here on Think America, where we reason first and then converse. I'm Terry Gilbert, your host. This is America's Radio Town Hall. Welcome to it. I invite real Americans to come to their microphone and join my microphone as we delve into thought-provoking conversation starters on all kinds of issues that you won't necessarily see in the headlines. Welcome this week to Carl. He is a former CEO, financial analyst, and he engineers code for computers, a real whiz. Hello, Carl. Nice to have you. He joins us from the eastern part of the country in Florida. Hello.
Thank you very much for having me on.
And we have Nancy. Nancy is a tax professional. She's a CPA and a grandmother. She joins us from the Southwest. Hello, Nancy.
Hello, Terry.
All right, here we go. First question for you. A lot of political types now think that President Trump actually squanders his political collateral or political capital, some people say. In fact, he might even agree. He tweets out everything. He sort of shoots from the hip. We all know that. In a recent interview, the president says he never hoards it, but he just says and does what he thinks is best for the country, regardless of his political future. And he does it when he wants to do it. So he's not necessarily pensive and cerebral before he does it. He speaks, of course, with candor. He's very passionate. One could say that's the very reason it makes him popular. These are the characteristics that people like in him. But at the same time, he has lost voters, as we know, particularly the white women suburban voters from the midterms. Carl, I'll start with you. Should he try to garner up more political capital, or is he doing just fine?
Well, I don't think he's doing just fine, but I don't think political capital is going to get him anywhere. The reality of what's going on with the Trump administration right now is that he made a series of promises, very serious promises, with one of the most important ones being to secure the border. Mm-hmm. And he hasn't done it. He also said he was going to take care of the healthcare mess, which, by the way, is the big financial issue that faces American families. Leave the stock market out of it. This is the one that hits everyone in their wallet. He's done nothing about that either. And so those are the two items that are going to sink this presidency and going to sink him in 2020. That picture of the Honduran woman who jumped the wall and then gave birth a couple of hours later, dropping an anchor baby here in the United States, that is going to be run in the primaries. It is going to be on every single television screen in a year and a half.
Well, to his credit, this past week, he now continues to bark about shutting down the government for at least his $5 billion for the border wall funding, and has also barked out the fact that if Congress doesn't play nice in the sandbox with him, Nancy, that he will have the military build the wall. So to Carl's first point, how do you respond to that?
Oh, we definitely need a wall. We need protection on the southern border to keep the hordes of people that want to come into our country.
And you're from the Southwest. So as he does this and talks about this via tweet, does he garner political capital or subtract from his political capital?
Well, I think that especially the people here in the Southwest, they want to be secure. They want the wall. But Trump is meeting resistance every step of the way. It's just not that easy to do. There's so many forces, political forces, that are opposing him.
Back to you, Carl. I tend to agree with that. He has talked about the wall. And to your second point about healthcare, he tried. I mean, he's just one branch of government, one entity of power. Now, it is true that it can sink his presidency if he can't corral our Congress to help him with all of this. So where is he with your 2 points on the whole political capital spectrum?
Well, I think he's in serious trouble, but this is what happens when you have all three branches of government at one time and you don't get it done. You know, Trump's biggest problem is he threatened to shut the government down shortly into his presidency if he didn't get his border funding. And then he didn't do it. And then he said he would do it a second time. You know, this is the last time I'm going to sign a CR without having this problem solved. And the CR expires. And again, he didn't do it. Well, okay, political capital. How about we don't believe you anymore? So now he says, well, I'm going to shut. No, but he just signed an extension. Hello. So why would anyone in his party or the other party fear the consequence when he says he's going to do something and doesn't do it?
Well, he does say things that he's going to do and then does do it. He's unpredictable that way. He's also a newbie. He doesn't know exactly how to do everything. And I'm not necessarily defending him. I'm explaining it from my perspective. When it came around to healthcare, it was nobody could shoot straight because it was a brand new administration. Nobody knew who was on first. He wasn't exactly sure who was on first. One of the things that bothers me the most about political capital and collateral that he has is that he's got a revolving door right there in the West Wing. It's very hard to figure out if it isn't total commotion all the time. And I'm afraid I'm looking at total commotion all the time. They're even considering, Nancy, Reince Priebus to come back into that job, for crying out loud. So I sit there and I go, well, some things he's been very strong on, and other things, to Carl's point, it's the administration that couldn't shoot straight. And I give him slack on all that for the first year, maybe 18 months. But now I'm wondering if it's just impossible there in the White House, Nancy.
You know, you have a good point, Terry, because the staff turnover is just relentless. He keeps coming up with new advisors to advise him on what to do. So I agree that there probably is turmoil in the White House.
I want to get to something else. There is a piece of capital, and I'll go to you, Nancy, and then back to you, Carl. There is a piece of capital that he has not used, and I kind of thought that he would last summer during the Kavanaugh chaos, and that is the declassification and releasing of the FISA documents, which shows the application and how that whole thing got bollocksed up and screwed up, and how the Democrats and Obama's DOJ and FBI are to blame on that. And there was a point where everybody on the right was salivating because I'm going to declassify all of FISA. And then lo and behold, within days, there was Kavanaugh that was proffered, and we had the Kavanaugh chaos for at least 3 weeks, maybe a month. And all we heard about was Kavanaugh. So that he's keeping in his hip pocket, it is a trump card. That is political capital, in my view, Nancy. When will he show that? Because
I would love to see
show that during Jeff Sessions' session in office.
I would love to see what's going on with the FISA stuff, because I keep hearing bits and pieces of it, but I am not sure that I can connect the dots yet and know really what is going on in the foundation of the whole problem.
Carl, your take on the FISA document application and declassifying all of that as political capital that he has in his hip pocket.
Well, it's nuclear. And the problem is that what we have in the public, if it's backed up by the documents, says that the Democratic Party paid for all of this as opposition research. The FBI knew it was unreliable and that it was essentially paid opposition research. They concealed that from the judge. They got a warrant based upon that. That is felony criminal fraud for every single person involved. And by the way, those crimes are not small ball crimes. We're talking about 10-year in hard prison criminal felonies for everyone. So why not play the card if you are really the guy that's going to drain the swamp? And the answer is simple. Trump wants the swamp power for himself.
What do you mean by that?
Hoover was infamous for using his political power and the FBI, the Bureau, to punish his political enemies. It was called the Hoover FBI for decades after he left the position. Trump is just looking for the same thing. He doesn't want to see us destroyed. He wants the power for his own purposes.
I understand the power aspect, but are you saying he wants his own cronies in a new swamp?
Absolutely, because if you destroy the ability to do this, you destroy it for everybody. If you lock all of these people up, they all go to jail, all of them. And then that's the end of it. It's over. And if the people get riled up enough to say we're withdrawing consent from the government, which could happen, then that becomes the demand that the American public puts on the government. And then the Democrats can't use it anymore, but the Republicans can't use it anymore either. And that would be bad for him.
And Nancy, what is your take on all of that? That he needs his own swamp so that he can have his own power with his own swamp fish?
You know, the workings in Washington is so huge. I've come to the conclusion that that's really the way things work, is that it's all about power and who has the power.
Which means it's all about money and all about connections.
Yes.
Well, I look at some of this political. I'm not opposed to what you just said, but I look at some of this and I do not know that this man wants the job 4 years from now. I've come to think maybe this is play acting a bit. Now, that's not to say he doesn't love the country. It's to say he's made it to the height of power. He is learning on the job. He shoots himself in the foot almost daily, if not every other day, with the stupid, debasing tweets, which he doesn't need to do, like calling, for example, Omarosa, who he put in the West Wing, as a dog and a lowlife. Why are you doing that? Why did John Kelly have to go? I read a Vanity Fair article just yesterday about John Kelly, this hugely decorated Marine general who absolutely pulls his hair out because Jared and Ivanka have access to the daddy, as the Vanity Fair was referring, and he can't seem to stop the flow into the Oval Office. I mean, that to me is bizarre. Why would you want to shoot yourself in the foot, President Trump? favoring people over a guy you put in that job when you said Reince Priebus wasn't good enough. And now John Kelly's gone and Jeff Sessions gone. To me, the political capital is coming from his own gun, where he destroys his political capital, shooting himself in the foot. There is a double standard. There's too many tweets. However, if he wins re-election in 2020, then I might eat my words, Carl, because then he will want the power to continue rather than go back into real estate and make oodles of more money, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it has nothing to do with not loving the country.
I think you're right there. I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with not loving the country, but you do have to realize that what just came out here in the last week is now we have Trump's chief fixer, his attorney, is going to prison for doing the very same thing that Hillary Clinton did during this last election.
Carl, hold that thought. We'll dovetail into the next segment. You're listening to Think America. I'm Terry Gilbert. Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilbert. You can find me on Facebook, Terry Talk Radio. Subscribe to our podcast at thinkamericaradio.com. Find the little red tab and click on the podcast, and then you will be a subscriber to the show and all of our past archive shows. I want to switch gears now. We'll get back into politics in a little bit and political capital with Carl and Nancy. A few years back, guys, Michael Caine, an award-winning British and Hollywood actor, gave a newspaper a tip to what he called a healthy marriage. And it was this. This might come as a bit of a surprise to you. And it was not having to share a bathroom with his spouse. He's been married to the same woman for over 44 years. I think it's like 45 years now. He says, you never share a bathroom with your wife. Otherwise, you have a tiny, tiny little corner with a little razor and a toothbrush in it, and you can never get in there to use the razor and the toothbrush. And I was thinking about this. Bathrooms are the place where the most personal and private activities take place, where you are not in your most attractive state. So why expose your spouse to this scenario, Nancy? Do you think he's on to something there about a happy marriage?
You know, it is very interesting, and bathroom time isn't fun or pretty or attractive, but not everybody has the resources to buy a big enough house to have all kinds of bathrooms. It's really nice to be able to step off, step out, and not be exposed to that stuff.
Most houses have 2 bathrooms, most, I would say. And I think he is onto something, Carl. At least have your own personal space.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's actually, I read that and I thought it was amusing. The premise that, we kind of need a spot that we can do those things that are just not for public consumption. And I think there's something to that because, how many, speaking as a man, how many times have I sat there and said, oh, gee, not another half hour in there, right? You get your game face on. So, yeah, I think there may be something to that. And it's nothing that I have managed to practice in my life thus far, but yeah.
I think it is very important, and it spreads into other areas of our life. I grew up with 6 brothers and sisters, and one of my older sisters always had her own desk. She always was near the bathroom where her room was. I bunked up with another sister. I never had my own desk. I never had my own real space. I put on my makeup going to high school in the car with my little flip makeup blusher where a tiny little mirror was there. I value personal space so much. How do you have any room to do anything, much less have your privacy and your bathroom activities completed to get to the job, to get to work, to get to school, if you don't have your own space? I think people need their own dresser. I think they need their own desk. I think, if possible, they should have their little corner in the house, in the universe, that is only theirs, and nobody can come in unless you say so, Nancy.
Yeah, I live by myself, and I really do like it. It's a small space, but I do what I want, and there's rarely people are around to get in my way. So, yeah, it is nice having your own space.
There's a reason why the saying, Carl, many cooks in the kitchen, too many cooks in the kitchen. Same thing with kitchen. Do you cook?
Oh, yeah. And stay out of my kitchen.
Right. I got into a tussle the other night. My husband's deciding he's going to learn how to make a certain kind of soup. And he says to me, he's not a good cook. He says to me, I'm going to learn dish by dish as I do this. I said, that's not how to set up a kitchen. You don't do dish by dish or bowl by bowl, meaning I'm going to learn how to make a, steak dinner. And then I'm going to learn how to make hamburgers. I said, you don't do it that way. You've got to set up what goes in the freezer, what goes in the refrigerator. You got to set up your spices. You got to set up your staples. Well, he wanted none of it. And now he's going to decide how to make a certain soup, a certain winter soup that he saw in a magazine. And I was pulling my hair out, and I just finally said, get out of the kitchen. And so we had an argument over it. And then I thought, okay, you'll go waste all of that. You'll go figure that he just couldn't figure it out. And I said, at one point, I said, you're going to need to strain that. And he was thinking strain as in like with spaghetti water. And I said, if you use that colander, you're going to get rid of all the liquid of your soup. And I stormed out of the kitchen. Nancy, do you have those experiences? Same thing can happen in a bathroom, by the way.
Oh, yes, I have had those experiences. I have a tiny kitchen. And when my boyfriend comes over, it's like constant butt bump. And I don't like it.
Well, if it's a dinner time thing, it's time to pour the wine, have a scotch, have a beer, and try to enjoy it. But for people that are in my bathroom, get the hell out. People in my kitchen, get the hell out. And I would say the same about my desk. My desk has got papers all over the place and all kinds of stuff. And I say, I don't care. It's the messiest part of the house, but it's my mess. So stay out of it. Last thought, Carl, we got 30 seconds.
Oh, I like this in general. I think people do need to have their own personal space, no matter how intimately involved with someone else you are.
All right. I think Michael Caine is on to something. It can save your marriage if you got your own private bathroom. All right. Straight ahead, we will be talking with a woman who is a mental health writer and advocate on handling holiday depression. You're listening to Think America. Reason first, then converse. Stick around. I'm interviewing now Therese Borchard on handling holiday depression. Many people don't like the holidays, from Halloween to Thanksgiving to Christmas time and to New Year's time. And then they sink even to a deeper depression come February, where many of them are housebound due to the weather. And February is kind of that blah month for many before springtime. I've asked her to come on the program. She's the author of Beyond Blue, and all of her work has been featured on many news outlets: The Wall Street Journal, Atlantic, USA Today, O Magazine, Psychology Today, Parenting, Washington Post, Fox Time, and all the rest. She's herself has endured 23 different med combinations, 7 psychiatrists, 2 psychiatric wards, alternative therapies, and many suicide impulses. You're still standing, Therese. Welcome to the program. Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you, too.
All right, I want to start just with your comment before we get into specifics about holiday depression. Why do you suppose, and I've wondered this sincerely for some time, that so many people in modern society, it seems, are depressed? And the reason why I ask that, is it that we're hearing about it more, that the numbers really haven't increased, or that more people are truly clinically depressed, even bipolar, because of modern stresses, modern anxiety, and yet we have better medication? I don't know why it's in the news so much. Maybe it's just that we have just more news outlets. What is your take? Are so many people so many more people depressed than in years past?
Well, I don't know if it's more. I mean, the people have been depressed ever since, going back to the ancient times. There is, I do believe, more pressure today to succeed. I was just reading Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff, and she was talking about our culture of productivity and that being tied to one's worth. And I think that's becoming increasingly more apparent in this culture. And so if you have periods where you're down and you're not as productive, there's this feeling of you're not worth anything. And I think that drives depression. I know I just was helping with another story on CEOs and depression and the rate of depression among CEOs and entrepreneurs and highly successful people. And I think it's because that drive for success in some ways, both the character traits of highly successful people are the same as depression, but also because if you have that lull in productivity, I think the message of our culture is just that you're not worth anything. And so to be tied to what we do, I think, is a real liability.
And is the stepping stone before depression kicks in with these high achievers, and I see this with college kids, even high school kids, is the stepping stone anxiety, where extremely nervous about something at every turn, they can't focus, becoming panicked that they're not good enough? Or can one just kind of jump over the anxiety and just sink into deep depression and give up?
I think both can happen. I see in my kids are teenagers, and I see in them that anxiety is often a precursor. Many of them are anxious with the load at school, with the pressures to compete in club sports. We didn't when I was a kid, there wasn't that pressure to succeed in a club sport. We rode our bikes to the neighbor's house. There was that kind of the respite and the play. The play is an essential, I think, antidote for depression. And so I think that the anxiety is a precursor. But I also see people who have the genetic predisposition to depression, and they think without that anxiety. I think both are there, but I do see in the younger generation more anxiety.
I also see the stress that comes across the computer to compete with the beautiful people online, whether it's a doctored photo on Facebook or it is the tabloids that are online. It's beautiful bodies, beautiful wealth, beautiful youth, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think that helps. And so there are folks that punish themselves with food and booze and cigarettes and dope and shopping and all the rest to keep up. Was that your case in your situation?
Well, not in my situation, but I definitely see that in my kid's situation. I just attended an adolescent depression awareness program, and she thought Facebook was evil because she sees these kids and that weren't invited to parties, and they're posted all of her friends having a great time. And of course, for some people who are a little bit more resilient, it's a night of tears. Oh, that's too bad. But for someone with a real sensitivity and a predisposition to depression, that can be devastating, and so, to have everybody's life online. I know for me, it's very difficult as a mental health blogger to be vulnerable and to kind of expose those feelings because, you become open to all sorts of feedback, and some of it's not as supportive as you would like. So,
For sure, because now you have thrown yourself into the public arena. I know that all too well. Let's move on to your tips to keep merry and bright and try to have 'tis the season of joy when one is clinically depressed or super anxious or spinning out of control because you can't keep up. Calm the audience down, if you will, with your personal tips to stay out of the depression lane.
I think, someone was just talking to me the other day about how they're their daughter was starting to get depressed during the season. And I said, and I think this is really true for me, the expectation, the merriment of the season can really put the pressure on you to feel joy, kind of like those first spring days when everyone's out with a Frisbee and you feel like you should be happy. And I think to remind yourself that it's okay if you're feeling sad, to just allow that sadness and to see the value in the sadness. One of the best movies I ever saw was Inside Out, when the role of sadness and everything. When you take the sadness out, the other emotions can't do their part. So to acknowledge that and just to be okay with not feeling happy and joyous, and to allow yourself to feel whatever emotions you feel, and to kind of tune the Christmas carols. I know that sometimes kind of gets me. It's the most wonderful time of the year, that sort of thing. And well, for some people it's not a reminder. Many losses occur during this time. A lot of reminders of death and different memories, and so it's okay to mourn that. It's all right to be with that sadness.
Talk to us a little bit about what your thoughts are on keeping exercise front and center during the weeks of, say, Christmas and New Year's. What about high intake of sugar? Because I know sugar can trigger a lot of up and down. So the health angle, speak to that, if you will.
Well, I think those are critical to keep up your self-care. I know the sugar for me, I'm really sensitive to it, and it's going to just kind of trigger your nervous system even more, as well as sleep, just to be extremely careful about your sleep hygiene, to get the adequate rest that you need, to eat the right foods that you need, and to exercise. And by exercise, I just had a discussion with my doctor. When I'm stressed, I tend to exercise too much, and that can be just as dangerous as exercising too little. So to be careful of not exhausting yourself too, with trying to use that as kind of an escape. To practice self-care, with whatever you do, but especially with regard to the sleep, to the diet. And I'm going to throw in caffeine and alcohol in that too. I think those are kind of the big, they can really exacerbate your anxiety. So to keep that in check, and like I said, to do exercise, but in moderation.
And remember what the season is all about. And maybe the spiritual angle can help calm people down and get them out of the depressed. It's a joyful time as well. And remember the reason for the season. Therese Borchard, you can find her at, please give your website.
ThereseBorchard.com.
Appreciate your time with us. Good luck. And 'tis the season to be jolly to you.
Thank you. You too.
All right. We'll be back on Think America. Welcome back to Think America. I'm Terry Gilbert with Nancy and Carl. Again, you can find Therese Borchard at that name, ThereseBorchard.com, mental health writer and advocate. Switching gears, GM got bailed out a decade ago by American taxpayers. This was the tune of over $11 billion. And now here we are, December of 2018, fast forward. And they are, surprisingly, to many listeners, laying off 15% of the workforce. Now, here we are, 10 years ago, saving their bacon, but now 5 factories are gone, 15% of the workforce being laid off, 25% of its executive force laying off. And they say they're going to focus on UVs and trucks. What's going on, Carl? Why? Let's get into this. We bailed them out, and now look at them 10 years later.
Well, why is that a surprise? There was no consequence. The reality of General Motors is that, like every other car company, like every other corporation, they respond to incentives. You handed them a bunch of money. There were no strings attached to the money. There was nothing that says, if you don't do this, we're going to put you in receivership and shut you down. And so that's not what happened. And, is it any shock? No. Now, the reality is that EVs, for the majority of people, are a scam. They have a higher total cost of ownership. And whether you believe in the global warming thing or not doesn't matter, because there are ways to get liquid hydrocarbons that don't involve releasing CO2 on a net basis. But we don't want to do those things. So what do we do, though? We fawn all over this greenie thing, and then we leave the trade implications alone. Why is anyone surprised that General Motors is shutting down Youngstown, which makes the cruise? But they are leaving the plant in Mexico open that makes the cruise. They pay in Mexico $4 an hour for labor. In the United States, they pay $26 an hour for labor. This is not complicated. Trump's tariffs and claims notwithstanding, this is the incentive system that we left in place during Obama's presidency.
We were buffaloed into thinking, or the American people I'm talking about, in general, buffaloed, Nancy, into thinking that GM needed a bailout and that they would prosper and save all of the ecosystem, as it were, of automotive. That if we didn't bail them out, automotive would crumble and all of the supply chain would crumble, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you, Obama. Speaking of political capital, where's his political capital in the toilet for this, Nancy?
I don't, it's unfortunate for a big company like this, like GM, if you bail them out, but if you don't fix the systemic weakness of the company, you're going to have the problem again. It's just going to come back. They simply cannot compete against Honda, Toyota in the sedan market. And so a bailout saves a bunch of jobs years ago, but it didn't save the company from themselves and their ability to produce cars that people want to buy.
At least Trump threw a fit on this, Carl. We were talking about Trump earlier.
Well, yeah, he threw a fit, but what did he do about it?
Well, he's done nothing about it other than throw a fit on Twitter.
Right, which accomplishes.
But at least he did that.
Well, yeah, okay, and I'm still laid off if I'm in Youngstown. Tell me how you actually solve the problem. The reality is that we as a society, do we need small, economical, inexpensive vehicles that people can afford to pay cash for and buy? Yes. Who's going to make them? Because right now there's no incentive for GM to make them, or Ford.
Toyota, Honda, Nissan, they make them.
Well, I own a Mazda. Why didn't I buy a GM? Because I have a GM that was assembled in Wisconsin, Janesville. That plant is now closed, and it's 15 years old, and it's a wreck.
What should Trump do? This is a perfect opportunity, speaking of political capital that we were talking about in segment one, and we had to cut that a little short, Carl. What should Trump do? It seems like this is good cannon fodder to get some political capital back.
Well, you can't force General Motors to leave the plant open. What could you do? He could kill all the EV subsidies. That would be a good start.
He could also say, you're not too big to fail anybody. That goes for the banks and anybody out there going forward if he's going to tweet something.
Yeah, let them all blow up. If you are mismanaged, then you go under and you lose your jobs. Oh, gee, that's so sad. You know what? If we'd done that with the banks, does anyone think that there wouldn't have been another bank on the same street corner 3 days later? Of course they would have.
Let's pick it up on the backside of this break. I'm Terry Gilbert. This is Think America, Reason First, and then Converse. We're talking about GM, how they got bailed out a decade ago, and now, guess what? They're laying off workers. We got one more segment ahead on this, and then Change Your Life Technology. Stick around. Welcome back to the program. We've been talking about how General Motors got bailed out a decade ago under President Obama. It was the tune of almost, a little over $11 billion, upwards $12 billion. Fast forward now, and GM this month laying off 15% of their workforce and 25% of their executive force just to focus on trucks and UVs. Why didn't they do that a long time ago? Who knows? Well, I know. We paid them not to. That's the simple answer. Carl, let's pick up on all of this and go back to what we were saying at the first segment about President Trump's capital. It strikes me, political capital, it strikes me that Obama isn't taking a hit for this, and yet it was under his term when GM got bailed out.
It wasn't just GM, remember. It was also all the banks. It was the execution of what had happened with, with Bush and Paulson during the crash, and to really put the point on it, it was the healthcare system, which was on the verge of collapse. And instead of fixing the problem, all the monopolist influences, all of the paper pushers that never provide a second of care to a single person, they're essentially parasitic within the system. Instead, what we did was we institutionalized it and made it part of government, and so it can never go away.
Do you think with GM, Nancy, it's not in crisis mode, making the headlines 24/7, and that's why Trump doesn't do much with it? In other words, he's got bigger fish to fry, like keeping Mueller at bay, trying to not be associated with the crimes of Cohen, trying to get this wall up, even if the military has to build it with a funding stream through the Pentagon. He's got migrants at the Tijuana border. I mean, he's got other fish to fry, not to mention all the other geopolitics. Look at the Brexit situation. He has told Theresa May he's there to help her try to work this out. It's to our benefit that there's a cleaner Brexit, a clean Brexit anyway. Is that why nothing's happening on this GM story as far as he's concerned, or so it appears?
Well, bailout didn't work 10 years ago. Why do that same thing all over again?
But bailout did work for a while.
But we're back into the same problem. They didn't fix GM.
I'm not suggesting that President Trump proffer a bailout for GM. I'm merely asking, why do you think this hasn't taken dominance? Just to point out the fact that, as you just said, bailouts don't work. They don't solve problems. Why don't we neener back to Obama to say, okay, look, American people, putting this on the headline, look, American people, this doesn't work. It didn't work for the banks. It doesn't work for the car industry. Let's never do it. I think that's a way Trump can get more political capital, because he's losing it with all these dumb tweets, in my opinion, that he throws out there.
I think you have to have something to go forward with. And the problem with any kind of a tweet like that or any kind of a position like that is, what is the alternative you're going to proffer to the American public? You've still got all these people in Youngstown. They're going to lose their jobs.
Perhaps this isn't top of his political totem pole. I don't think it is. I'm just wondering, to get back in the good graces of the American people. And since he's attacking the left every single day, this is great cannon fodder to do it. Even if it's rhetoric, because rhetoric builds a political philosophy around who the candidate is, and whether or not you get to it, it can save his bacon going into 2020. Look at what he did with the wall, Carl. I mean, where's the wall? It got him into the White House. It may keep him in the White House. This is another piece that could help him with that, even if it's rhetorical.
Not if it doesn't get built. And the same thing here is that what you've got right now is if he loses Ohio in 2020 as a result of these plant closures, he does not get reelected. That's the electoral math.
I want to talk a little bit about cancer being so extremely complicated. There is a new biomarker, however, which had been discovered by Queensland scientists, University of Queensland, that was common in every type of cancer that they examined. They looked at methyl groups, which change formations. These methyl groups, when placed in a solution that the cancer is in the methyl group, the cancer itself can be measured against solid surfaces and break away. There is now a new device, inexpensive and portable, that can detect these kind of breakaway cancer molecules that eventually can be treated. With this device, people now in about 10 minutes can determine if they have some kind of cancer. 90% accurate. 10 minutes, under 10 minutes, and this new device to look at these methyl groups is coming out of the University of Queensland. These scientists, I think, are onto something. I'm Terry Gilberg. Think America, where we reason first and then converse. Thank you to Carl. Thank you to Nancy. Megan will be with us again next week. Go to thinkamericaradio.com. I'll see you next time.